Welcome and thank you for choosing True Grit, the show about what it really takes to rise, rebuild, and stay the course when life hits hard. I'm Kalish, a coach, storyteller, and believer in the kind of strength you can't fake. Around here, we talk about real people, real stories, and the lessons that shape us, from resilience and mindset to health and healing, because grit isn't about grinding harder, it's about who you become when you don't quit. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to True Grit Podcast. I have a interesting podcast for today, and I don't have it very well scripted out. Not that these are ever really scripted, but I try to at least go off an outline. And so we're going to see what comes up with this one. But it is going to be about strength and leadership and my personal story where we're combining the two, both in the gym and sitting on the dais of city council leading meetings as the mayor, and giving you a little bit of a behind the scenes look of what that was like. So to kind of go back, I did record a bunch of these type episodes just kind of for my own personal practice a few weeks back. And I decided to go put them out to the public. It was a little bit of an exercise of just saying the words and then putting it out there and being open to whatever comes my way there. And again, I didn't really think that many people were going to pay attention to them. They weren't in podcast form. I was just uploading them to my Facebook page, and I actually got a lot of really good feedback. And this was really the first time that I started talking about these stories. I might say things here and there in passing with some friends or whatever, but I was really putting together like this string of thought of some of the really big pivotal moments of when I was on council. There's going to be more of these stories in the future, but for today's sake, I'm going to share a couple of them. As I was sitting here today debating on which topic I wanted to talk about, one was to encourage women to actually pursue strength. But on another hand, I did want to share a bit about my city council. I want to sprinkle in these things so it's not always these informative, nutrition, weight training, those sorts of podcasts, but to share some of the stories. But yet I found that I could create a parallel between the two, because there really was a parallel between the two. About the time that I got on council, I was getting back in the gym, and I had learned a new way of training, of strength training. I'd done it in the past, but in a different way. Now I was doing really heavy weights with a barbell, and it was really helpful for me to step into that leadership role. A lot of the resilience that you need to have when you step into those roles, you possess and you develop those in the gym when you're testing your body to its limits, when you're seeing how much stress your body can go under. And just like practicing it out in public, physically from the gym, you will see those strength gains. And it's just a really interesting thing to think about. And so here I want to share the stories and draw these parallels. When I was doing kind of that brain dump before, I knew I wanted to draw upon those stories and create some of those connecting points. And what came up were some really powerful moments that I do want to share now in a much more palatable format. This is more easy to consume because it's easier to jump around to different sections. Just the podcasting is easier anyway than just to put out a solid video. Plus, I was having to do all this editing, and anyway, whole other story. But if I can really start off the storytelling portion of this, let me bring you to election night 2020, when I am standing beside my campaign manager / one of my best friends, and we went to just go take pictures. I had a step and repeat. If you don't know what that is, it's those sheets that they put up, whether it's red carpet or whatever. And people will take pictures, and I'll usually have like a logo. And so the logo gets repeated, and it's called a step and repeat. So I had the step and repeat of our campaign logo up there. So the Kalish and the really cool design that we absolutely loved. Go to take a victory picture together. And all of a sudden, what gets captured is us just covered in foamy champagne. Our friends and family and volunteers just, covered us in champagne. And we just got like just the best moment of true surprise. And I mean, it really felt like this moment of elation, because if you were to follow this campaign, if you were to be in on this campaign, you would have seen just how much heart and soul went into it, and how, I mean, I believe that any person who really believes in their purpose, or in their campaign, they put a lot into it too. But having ran two different campaigns, this was definitely a different feeling to be loved and supported by these amazing people who shared a lot of the same vision with me and wanted to see something better for their town. And to to really drive home the point of just how wild this feeling was, months beforehand, actually even just leading up to the campaign, the election night itself, people did not believe that we were going to win. No one believed that we were going to win except for us. I had many, many conversations with people when they found out that I was running against the incumbent, and with her name recognition, and that there was another person in the race too, which, by the way, they had both me and the other candidate who were running against campaign, or who were running against the incumbent, were approached by people who were concerned, that wanted her out of office, but wanted one of us to win. And they came to both of us at different times, and they told me what they said to him, and then repeated the same thing to me, that if we had any chance of winning this campaign, one of us needed to drop out. And so I looked at these people and said, well, then you need to go talk to him and tell him, because we are bringing something Hanford has never seen before, which was really bold words, considering the fact that just a few years prior, I ran for that same seat and came in last place out of 4 people. The incumbent, when she won, she just sat out signs. I believe that the story, what I heard, was a friend came along, just got into her garage where she had her old campaign signs. They put it all around the neighborhood, and that was it. That's all she wrote. There's other people that were way more seasoned than it was, that were running really, really well ran campaigns. So it was no wonder that I came in last place, having no real knowledge or anything like that. People people thought it was crazy that I had such conviction at our potential to actually succeed in this race. So what ended up happening though is I fail forward. I learned so much from that first run. And the big takeaway from that was, if I just gave up then and didn't learn from those mistakes, didn't learn how to adapt and bring my A game the next time, I never would have experienced that type of success. And to go on then later to get rotated in as mayor of this town of 60,000 people is just one of those things of like, I still can't believe that that actually happened. And it's a very proud moment, not just for the title. I mean, yes, it's a reminder of what I can accomplish, but just the responsibility though that also came with that. And that's the part that I also want to share, because it is so important for people to understand what it takes to be a leader. And it doesn't matter whether it's a town of 60,000 or you're leading your household, or, oh my God, trying to just get a group of your girlfriends to decide on a restaurant to go to. But knowing how to show up in your own power, though, and how making sure that you are focusing on your strength training and how that actually translates well into that. So, ladies, this is where I want your ears to perk up. I want you to pay attention to this and just how important it is to be strength training. I am finding, as I reflect back on this experience, that the resilience that you build while building your muscle is the same resilience and same power that you show up in your leadership. There is this grounded power that you have to tap into when you're really pushing yourself and building that muscle. When you're not just picking up the pink baby weights and just like, getting your sweat on and whatever. And yes, you can feel the burn and whatever. But when you're picking up a heavy weight, when you're setting that heavy bar on your shoulders and you have to squat down and convince your body to get back up, and then feeling that moment of accomplishment is the same drive, same grounded energy that you show up with in those moments of leadership. And if you think about it, you could almost call it soft. So, when you think about the feminine and female energy, it is this soft and grounded, but that doesn't mean weak. And I believe that this is a really good analogy, because being grounded means being rooted, being able to weather the storm. That is powerful. And you're not doing it with this, look at me type of energy. You plant your feet, you get yourself positioned correctly. Your posture has to be right. And then you go in with conviction, and you speak with conviction the same way that you execute those lifts with conviction. And yes, there is a good possibility you might fail, especially when you're getting out there on the skinny branch. There's an opportunity for you to fail. But as I said before too, failure is not the worst thing that could happen. It is a learning opportunity. And if you fail forward, you will see future success. So getting underneath that heavy barbell, you fail, and you now learn where your limits are. And then you train to keep upping those limits. You dial it back, and then you keep going for it. Same thing with these leadership moments. Now, I have to say that when I stepped into the mayoral role, and if I can kind of backtrack actually to explain how that happens, because a lot of people think that mayors get elected in, and that there's different kinds of setups when it comes to cities. And in our case, it was an elected position. It was a position that was rotated amongst the city council, because we had a city manager who ran the day-to-day operations. We're still a small town, so we didn't have this full-time figurehead of an elected official in the office all the time. So we would rotate around every year and pick a mayor and then the vice mayor, and the vice mayor taking on kind of the duties of the mayor when the mayor wasn't there. So figurehead role that would run the meetings. So when I got put into the seat as the mayor, I was not fully prepared for that yet. I had been on council for about a year when I got rotated in. The rest of the council voted me in to be the vice mayor. And then we had the mayor, and I don't want to get into this other story, but there was a big town hall that happened, and it went really, really ugly. There was a very contentious thing that was going on in our town. A big town hall was held. Hundreds of people showed up. They didn't want to actually learn anything. They just wanted to yell at us. It went poorly, and the mayor at the time was put under fire about how it was handled. Long story short, she and I switched roles. I took the mayor spot, and she went to the vice mayor spot. So now I'm stepping into this role at a time of some of the most contentious topics that were coming before the council, or has ever come before the council before, at least in a way that had such an activated community. And so I was figuring that over the course of the year as vice mayor, I would have that time to really start to marinate on how I would show up as that leader. I had some really great role models to look at, and how they would hold meetings, and kind of how I thought I would want to show up, and wanted to develop that skill. But it happened really quickly. And now I knew that not only was I going to have to learn how to run the meetings efficiently, but hold the space for these contentious crowds and make it to where we were still going to be able to get the people's work done. And this can be a very delicate dance of holding your power in that position, while still facilitating the discussion as well, dealing with outbursts from the crowd, dealing with people that maybe didn't want to follow the rules or wanted to bend the rules a little bit when it came during public comment. And here's the thing that naturally showed up for me. Now, a lot of times, like, we can speak a little bit about how men will hold the space and how women will hold the space. And a lot of times women, we will try to do the same thing that men do, and it's not natural for us. And we can get into masculine and feminine energetics, and maybe we'll touch on that just a little bit here. But there is a difference. And Not that either one is right or wrong, but it is how we hold ourselves and how we can hold that space for people, and we do it in a different energetics. And now that I understand that a little bit more, I started thinking about how those lessons probably would have benefited me back then if I had known these things about energetics a little bit more. But then there's part of me as I look at it, I realized that I did step into that role in my feminine, in that grounded, strong position. There wasn't any of this, I'm going to try to speak louder than everybody, which would have just made my voice go really, really high and really shrill. So I was able to hold that space and show up with quiet authority. That's the term that comes to my mind, is quiet authority. And when women can show up in that quiet authority, they are showing up in their feminine, which is formidable. Now, let me walk you through one of these contentious meetings. We're packed. There's standing room only type of situation. We've got a long queue of people coming up and speaking. There was something that I had to clean up too. There was a bad habit that had started happening where we were allowing people to come up with the, kind of a set amount of time that you normally would get, but then they would borrow from other people's time who weren't coming up to speak. Now, if that's what other towns want to do or whatever, and we're not here to debate like the First Amendment or anything, I'm just talking about the structure of the meeting and how that was kind of getting in the way of how we needed to run the meeting. It also turned out that it actually wasn't an appropriate way for us to do that. Since the people had already gotten used to that, but it can be really hard to backtrack that. So I had to go in there with a plan. And I knew if you can just give them the reason why, that can usually help out. And at the very least, we're going to manage expectations. So at the beginning of the meeting, I addressed that this was the issue, that this was how things were going to be ran, and and then gave them other options to voice their opinions to us, whether it was through one-on-one meetings through us or email, writing, whatever you had. And so when we had people coming up and maybe they weren't paying attention or whatever, and they tried to pass off or get time from other people, just had to sit there and be like, I'm sorry, no more explanation. I already explained myself. I already explained this thing. Just no. And standing firmly in that, "No, let's let the next person come up so that they can have their time, and let's be respectful of that." Another thing that was actually kind of funny to mention is that there was this recommendation from kind of this overarching group for all of the cities in California that we shouldn't allow clapping anymore, which was really, really weird. They felt like, that was just aggressive behavior. And I just saw how much that changed with the audience when they weren't allowed to clap anymore. It's this release of energy. Whether it was for actually, what I found was interesting. People would clap for things even when they didn't agree with it. It's just this release of energy, this kind of community support. And when you took that away, it made meetings a lot more contentious. So immediately, I didn't care if they were clapping for something that I thought was just, oh my God, that was completely wild and off the cuff. And where did that person come up with? I mean, okay, if you've never been to a city council meeting, find a night when they have something really contentious going on and go just sit there and bring your popcorn. It can be pretty entertaining on both sides. It can be really entertaining what the people say and then what the council or the staff will say. That's just kind of a little fun side note. A lot of meetings can actually get recorded, so you don't even have to show up in person. But the energy in the crowd is really something to watch. But I digress with that. I found that if I let them just release that, and I got flack from other council members for allowing that in, because say if somebody came up and spoke negatively about one of our staff members, they were saying by me allowing people to clap for those negative remarks was like me reinforcing that. And I said no. And again, there's another one where I had to be grounded in my authority and stand by what my convictions were and what I felt was the correct way to do it. And I just told them, no, that is not how I feel. And if that's how staff feels, we can have that discussion. But this is the opportunity for the people to go ahead and voice their opinions. And we also, on our side, have the opportunity to make some slight corrections, some slight feedback. We couldn't go off topic too much. and correct anything that was maybe misinformed. And I also have the ability, if they cross the line, I could shut them down on that and tell them that was inappropriate as well. So, difference of opinion was fine, and clapping, who cares? So by allowing that, I already figured out that that was helping to diffuse the thing. And again, this is where our feminine energy really helps us too. We have a real natural instinct for intuition. And so this was something that I could read from the room. It was thinking outside the box and seeing other meetings leading up to this and how much tension this rule of no clapping created. And so I was able to sit in my convictions in that, listen to my intuition, and allow for that to happen. And so later on, when things were spoken from the dais where and the crowd was really in disagreement with it, and they started to get those like little bit of rumblings, we had already let some of the steam off that pressure cooker earlier on. We allow them to, again, release some of that energy. And I found that they were a lot more receptive then. And I didn't have to sit there when they got a little unruly and bang the gavel and try to assert my dominance or anything like that. I have a microphone. There are speakers out there. I can very easily be louder than them without even raising my voice. I just had to get closer to the microphone. And half the time, I would put up my fingers to my lips and just go shh, and it was loud enough in the speakers that you could hear it. Actually calmed them down. In fact, my city manager jumped at one point the first time I did a good shh into the microphone. He jumped and everybody calmed down. The worst moment, I say worst, kind of loosely. The worst confrontation was one lady where she popped up in the audience, was really upset with something that was said and started yelling. And I warned her and said, "I'm sorry. I need you to sit back down. I can't have you doing any outbursts. Please sit down." She stood up once more again with something else that was said and did it again. And I gave her another warning. I said, "I do not want to remove you, but if you do this again, I will have you removed." That's all I had to do. I didn't scream at her, nothing. Just gave her those warnings, and she was good the rest of the time. I even got a message from her later on apologizing and thanking me for not throwing her out of the meeting. But again, I just had to have that quiet authority. I had to have that conviction, and there's so many other moments too where I had to really stand in those convictions and those really hard times or really crunchy times. There were times where I had to put the city business first before personal relationships. We had censorships that we had to do. There were we had to censure one of the council members too, who had actually been supportive of my campaign, and I had to stand and vote against him. There were really hard moments, very hard moments, and I could probably teach a master class in how to show up, be visible, and be comfortable in that. Because as long as you are confident and convicted in your beliefs, you can do the mindset work and know that people will be upset with you, and you have to be okay with that. And there's some sitting with that and marinating in that for a while. But I mean, it doesn't make it any easier. But I think because I've gone through some really, really difficult parts of that, because I've had to go through some really, really difficult moments like that. The other things where I had to make votes that you can't make everybody happy, unfortunately. And there were some things where I did disagree, but my hands were tied because of laws and how that would position the city in a bad way. If I voted the way that I believed I needed to vote in, I had to do what was best for the city. And it comes in so many different shapes and forms. And man, yeah, I could teach a master class in showing up and being visible and being comfortable in your own skin in those really dark, hard moments. It is something that I am bringing forward now into my business. After I left council, I just wanted to be invisible. It's really weird to be in the public eye like that, where I don't know when I go to the grocery store, I don't know who all recognized me. A lot of people don't recognize that they're elected officials, but a lot of people do. And then of those people who do recognize me, I don't know whether they hated me or loved me. A lot, again, I had very contentious things that I had to vote on time at times, and I was not going to make everybody happy. And there were times where it was a very hard divide between the people on one side or the other, and they felt very strongly one way or another. So there were people who legit, I mean, I feel like they would probably say that they hated me. If they truly feel that way, I don't know. But those were some of the words I'm hearing too. Now, here's another parallel that I want to bring up, and it's about shrinking, women needing to shrink down. We want to shrink or not want to. We are expected to shrink our voices. We are expected to shrink our presence. We are expected to shrink our bodies, to be petite, to be the small feminine creature. And I just want to say, fuck that. That doesn't do us any good on so many different levels. So many different levels. We'll start with us physically. People thinking that women shouldn't lift heavy, that we're going to get bulky, that we're going to look manly if we put on muscle is just another version of shrinking ourselves down. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and argue with like if certain people like a certain aesthetic, then that's one thing. But if I want to talk to you from a health perspective, you want to be putting on muscle. I don't mean being bodybuilder large. And let's also just squash that idea that you are going to get bulky just from looking at weights. Like that is not a thing. Well, at the moment, I'm 119. I weigh I am 5'4", and I still get a lot of comments about how tiny I look. Yet, just the other day, I was in there doing hip thrust with 235 pounds on the bar, and it was still light. We can lift very, very heavy weights. I eat a bunch of protein. I am starting to finally see more of a transformation. In fact, 2 years ago, when I really started, maybe about 3 years ago now, I was really starting to focus on putting on muscle. I was very, very tiny at that point. And it took these last 2 or 3 years just for me to get to like a normal size, a normal as in like, I don't look like this frail little thing anymore. I look like at least look like I'm a healthy weight. And from here now I can start putting on more muscle and probably looking a lot more like an actual personal trainer who lifts heavy. But that's the thing though. Muscle is the organ of longevity. It is metabolically favorable for us to have more muscle on us. And there's so much to get into with that. But if you want to have more carbohydrates, you want to eat more, you want to have more muscle on you. And the thing is that once we hit our 30s, our muscle naturally starts to decline. And women, because we start off so small in the first place and we are told to keep small and that we are going to look like a man if we put on muscle, we are even worse off as we get older because we're taking that bullshit advice. Bullshit advice that makes us more susceptible to the negative effects of menopause, where women start to put on more weight during that time and experience other side effects of going through perimenopause. And it's all because we are not putting on muscle early on and not worrying about maintaining and or improving muscle mass as we get older. And that is a fact. Yes, there are other things that come into play there too, but if you really want to have the best outcomes as you get older and not just be sitting there feeling bad for ourselves because we're going through the change, start lifting weights. Start lifting weights. Stop shrinking. Now, the parallel line to that of shrinking physically is also shrinking energetically. And that is still, even as an elected official, I still struggled with asserting my voice. Even though I did well with running these meetings, I did have people that would, silence and actually listen to what I had to say. There is still, we're still we're still in rooms that are dominated by males, and both men and female can be wired the same way too, where we will typically pay more attention to the male voice than the female voice. And again, I wish that I knew some of these energetics more. I wish I better understood these energetics back then, as well as I do now, and I'm continuing to learn it as well. But one of these interesting things was that even as I'm sitting there as mayor, I had a colleague who was running to keep her seat, and there was a lot of male chauvinism that was showing up in that race, to the point where she was told by somebody that she knew. I knew the guy as well. She found out that he was supporting the man in the race. And she confronted him on it, like, "Why do you feel that way?" And he had the audacity to tell her, "Well, it's about time we need to get a man on that. We need to get a man on that council that's going to run those meetings well." Mind you, this guy was never showing up to the meetings when I was running the meetings. And in fact, my city manager had confronted somebody at one point and said, "Say what you will about Mayor Morrill, but she runs a damn good meeting," which just, kind of got me. That was kind of proud to hear him stick up for me like that, and to get that kind of compliment too, especially during a time, as I mentioned, of how contentious it was. But she was also hearing a lot about how she just needed to be at home with her family. Shouldn't be worried about being on council. She needed to be home cooking for her family. I could not believe it. I was shaking with anger to hear about that. You can support one candidate for whatever reasons. You can agree or disagree with different candidates, but for that to be the reason in this day and age, and to be feeling that you should be making that decision for a woman, I mean, these are things that we as women are still coming up against. And it's not so much that we have to come in and with proving energy. We need to show up in our conviction. And so I'll share another story, which is when I decided to leave council a few months early. What ended up happening was, when things turned really, really ugly a couple years before that, I was at a point where I needed to make a decision if I was going to run for council again or not. My husband had gotten out of being active duty military. We wanted to be close to family, but then we were really proud of what we were laying down there. Things were really changing though. The community wasn't the same as we thought it would be. And we started looking at prioritizing our marriage, the health of our family, how we wanted our lives to be. And so earlier on, before the end of my term, we had already made the decision that not only was I not going to run, but that we were going to move, and we were going to be moving out of state to go be closer to family. So during the last year on council, we'd started house shopping, and great homes were popping up. But there were so many of these great homes that I was just like, okay, well, at least we know what's available. We know the price points. We're just kind of window shopping at that during that time. Well, long story short, my dream house pops up. As you can see, if you're watching this on video, we've got just a very unique house, one that you won't come across in this area. It ticked all of the boxes. It was this mid-century modern style, up on stilts with land. We back up to a river, still pretty centrally located. I mean, we just saw a deer out our window the other day. Our window, which is this giant circle, floor to ceiling circle, spirals. I mean, I could go on and on. I love this house. We still want to do some renovations on it, but it is everything that we wanted. And it was close to where my family lived as well. So it was just one of those things of, do we go now or do we go later on? One of the other council members, the one who had been mayor right before me, they finished up on her house way earlier than she had thought that she would. She was having a really hard time too, and I won't that's her story to share, but she had decided to leave council early. When she did that, we didn't fill her seat. So we were down to 4 council members. And at that point, the things I was working really, really hard on, there was going to be just a split divide on those votes. So we decided to just throw our hat in there, see if we could get this house or not. It was kind of like let's just see how it goes, and then we'll make a decision from there. Well, lo and behold, they accepted the offer, which was way below asking price. They also threw in all of the windows that needed to be replaced. And if you've ever watched any of the videos, my Instagram stories, you will see how ginormous these windows were. And it was about half of them were all fogged up here that and they just needed to be replaced. So there was just a lot that was working in our favor. And we were down to just these last few months that I had left on the council. And we made the decision. I made the decision to leave a little early, and it was just clear at that point, since we were only a 4-person council, that we would just fill the seat. That means the council would make a selection of candidates who would be eligible, and they would apply, we would interview, and then we would make an appointment for that person just to hold the seat and finish it off for the rest of the term. So definitely not the ideal thing to do. I understand that. I was very apologetic to everybody. It was one of those times where I had to put my family first and take an opportunity for us that we really hadn't taken before. That was not afforded to us before because we were really pigeonholed into staying in the location that we were for so many years. And we made the most of it. We really did love it for a long while there. And then the shift happened and we just lost the drive to stick it out for any longer than necessary. So I share this story because when it came time to discuss this on council and discuss the fact that we should go ahead and put somebody in my seat, 2 of the 4 of us decided that would not be necessary. And so myself and he was the vice mayor at that time, myself and the vice mayor were just flabbergasted that the other 2 decided that this should be the case. We argued a lot of the points of just how this was not the right thing for the city. I absolutely did mea culpa too of like I understand like I feel guilty about I'm putting the city in this position, but this is the thing I need to do to at least be right by the citizens. But they could not be convinced. And so in that moment I did something very, very wild. I pointed out that we were a military family. And as a military family, my husband has gone on multiple 6-month deployments and then some. We were a family used to working with having just one parent in the household and another one far away. Knowing that that was a temporary thing, we knew how to make that work. And so I go and I tell them that. And I said, and if this is what it takes, then this will be my version of a deployment. And it's what we would call a geobatch, where one person stays behind while the family moves and or the opposite way. But I would stay behind and rent a room from somebody in my district while my family moved. And I would make that work over the next few months. And that's how that was going to happen. And everybody was stunned. I heard from people that were sitting out in the audience later on that people were sitting there going like, can she do that? Can she do that? She can't do that. Can she do that? Yes, I absolutely could do that. As long as I lived in my district and had my mailing address there, I could absolutely do that. Having my family in the same district does not mean that I can't serve in my seat. You can even move within your district, and that's okay as long as you're still in your district. So the one who had replaced my friend, who had been the one that won that campaign race against a friend of mine, who was being told that she needs to be staying at home with her kids and making dinners and whatnot, he turned to me and said he was about ready to just completely dismiss it. He's like, "Oh well, okay, then you should go and discuss this with your husband and we'll circle back around on this." And I put my foot down and I said, absolutely not. I am taking back my resignation effective immediately. And I know that my husband will have my back fully. We have to make these decisions sometimes on the spot without talking to one another. He's had to do it in his career. And I know he will have my back on this. I'm not going home and discussing this with my husband. He will understand that this is the best thing that I have to do. And they were just floored. And on the inside, though, I was honestly going, fuck, Doug is going to kill me. I was still a little shocked though that they were like, all right, that's the end of the meeting. It is what it is. We'll move on then. And I stepped down from my chair that day just going, what the fuck just happened? But my text messages were lighting up. I had people coming up to me and telling me that was the most badass thing they'd ever seen. And on the inside, I'm going, thanks, but my God, what am I going to do here? I don't want to do this. I will do it. I will do it. but I don't want to. And so my husband got home from work that day. I asked him if he'd had a chance to catch the meeting at all. And he said no. I said, okay, we need to sit down and talk. And I was right. He lost his shit. However, I knew that once I explained to him the situation, and the fact that they were trying to make it just a 3-person council and how absolutely wrong that was, he absolutely had my back. I knew he would once he understood. His reaction to it, his initial reaction to it, was absolutely understandable. He did not get to see the lead up to it. And I told him, I just hope that they come around and see that this is something that needs to be done, and then that we could be free. However, I'm putting it out there, and I was already getting people offering to let me rent out rooms. They were right there in my district. I have been renting out rooms and just using points, miles, whatever, to fly back and forth, see the family, and come in to do meetings and whatever else I needed to do back and forth. We were going to work it out. So, but again, like having to sit in my convictions and do something that was just wildly uncomfortable. I mean, maybe I would have been able to do that all right without all the time in the gym. However, I do believe that it helped me sit in my convictions and let them know that I meant what I said. And so at the end of all of it, within a week or so, the council was willing to look at filling my seat to finish out the rest of my term. And we went about it and we put somebody in that spot. They finished the term. I did what I needed to do to fight for that community while also realizing that I was in this really weird position, knowing that I was also one that was creating that issue. But I had to do what I needed to do to make sure that it was the best choice for everybody, best choice for my family, best choice for my own mental health, and then also still putting the community first when I needed to. So, ladies, let's not be afraid to take up space physically and energetically. When we take up space, we step into our power. You do not realize just how powerful you are until you are tried and tested, while also giving yourself a moment to look back on moments when you have been tried and tested. And think about how you did show up in that. And I could probably guarantee that you did pretty well. And you probably don't give yourself enough credit for that. And if you look back and you go, oof, I don't like how that went, that's where you learn how to fail forward so you can show up better. So don't be afraid to pick up those heavy weights, and don't be afraid to speak your mind and stand in your convictions and be seen doing so. All right, that's it for now. I really hope that you had some big takeaways from this episode. I really loved sharing these stories with you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Bye. Thank you so much for being here on True Grit. I truly appreciate it. If this episode sparked something in you, share it, subscribe, or leave a quick review. It helps more people find these conversations. For more ways to connect, head to true-grit.fitness or come say hi on Instagram at true.grit_bold.wellness. I'll see you next time with more stories, lessons, and a little bit of grit.